Welcome to Elected, a podcast for women and our active accomplices in and around politics. I'm your host, Sarah Elder-Chamanara, and today my guest is my sincere pleasure to introduce another Sarah with also three. You have three. We're like almost name twins. Sarah Gabrielle Baron, who is a leadership contestant in the current Green Party of Canada federal leadership race. Hi, Sarah.
Hi, it's so nice to be here.
Thanks for joining me. So before we get started, in the spirit of reconciliation, it's important for me to share my personal commitment to learning the history of colonialism and the ongoing systemic violence and oppression against Indigenous peoples. The land where I live, work, and record from is the traditional territories of the Blackfoot Confederacy, the Siksika, the Kainai, Piikani, the Tsuut'ina, and Stoney Nakoda Nations, Métis Nation Region 3, and all people who make their homes in the Treaty 7 region of Southern Alberta. And Sarah, where are you joining me from today?
From Ottawa. I like to use the word Odawa, and I really love your land acknowledgement that it recognizes that the systemic violence and oppression is still ongoing today. As a high school teacher in communities that in Indigenous communities, I see it firsthand, and I experience it with my students firsthand. I am white, but it's important to recognize that it's not just something in the past. When I was door knocking in the last election in Durham, which was Aaron O'Toole's riding, you do come across that form of racism that says, just get over it. Right. And I'm like, tell that to my friends and students. So I really like your land acknowledgement. I like that you mentioned the Confederacy aspect of the nations where you live. So here in Ottawa, it's Algonquin First Nation and Anishinaabe First Nation territory, which do have in the past Confederate, treaties among themselves pre-contact. And the Anishinaabe Nation is comprised of the Three Fires Confederacy of the Ojibwe, Potawatomi, and Odawa First Nation. I think a lot of people in Ottawa don't know the origin of this city's name.
That's very interesting. I didn't either. So I'm going to add that onto my list of things to learn about. It is, I think, important. There was a woman who's currently running actually or she's been nominated as the candidate in the upcoming 2023 provincial election here in Maryland, Pagan North. And I was at an event or a protest that she was speaking at, and she encouraged people to make their land acknowledgements personal rather than just like a template. And so mine kind of evolves at times, but that active part of it is really important because the ongoing impacts are present day. That it's.
One of my campaign mottos is truth before reconciliation. And you can't just jump to reconciliation. And a lot of people don't know, like my degree back in the 90s was in politics and Indigenous studies. And I was lucky enough to have my teaching degree through the Indigenous Peoples Education ATEP program through Queen's University and the Indigenous Education Institute where I live on Manitoulin Island. So I'm lucky, right? Like I teach Indigenous studies and I work with Indigenous people and I get to learn from elders and knowledge keepers. And I do my best to navigate that in a way that's really respectful. But a lot of people just don't have the chance to have those interactions, right? They're getting their information from the internet, and the cultural differences between European ways of knowing and Indigenous ways of knowing are so different that just getting to a place of mutual understanding is really hard for a lot of people.
Well, and also, this isn't the first time I've said it, but I was very ignorant, and that was not because I wanted to be, but because I was a product of the system. In that, the education system, and my family, and so there's like there was there was one pivotal moment where I realized that people, including me, can cause harm, and that that's not the way forward. And so we each have an individual responsibility to do better, and that includes learning, even when it's really difficult and hard. And maybe in a political context, sometimes that hard learning can be done, in the public sphere. So which maybe is a good segue into our conversation around.
No, it's fine. I'm doing my best to the Indigenous Peoples Advisory Circle put forward some motions in our last policy round, and the Indigenous Peoples Advisory Circle is new to the Green Party of Canada, and it was an initiative that Lorraine Reckmans and some other Indigenous people in the party championed and made happen. And so I've incorporated those into my platform and try to champion those as much as possible, particularly aligning Canada's constitution with UNDRIP. Is really just kind of the crux of the problem. Like, let's get right to the heart of the problem, that Section 35 is an unfinished project. Well, and that Indigenous nations are nations.
And that's the UN. And so for someone who doesn't know what the UNDRIP stands for, that's can you share that with everyone?
Sure. Yeah. So Section 35 of our Constitution, or our Charter of Rights and Freedoms, that happened in 1982, right? And so, so the British North America Act, our Constitution from 1867, is grounded in deeply racist politics. But a previous law, one of the first laws in our country, is the Royal Proclamation of 1763, in which the Crown recognized Indigenous nations as nations. And the Crown promised in 1763 and 1764, the Silver Chain Wampum Belt, the Crown promised that any land deals between Indigenous leaders over land use would be with the Crown, that private interests couldn't go in and make land use deals with Indigenous leaders. And the Crown has abdicated that legal responsibility since at least 1867. So when we were having in 1982, when we were having our, when we were creating our Charter of Rights and Freedoms, and Quebec was insisting on having, distinct society clause in there, Indigenous leaders across the country went to the provinces and said, hello, we're over here. Can you advocate for us? And some of the provinces really did. So we got Section 35, but it's a gray zone. It's not well defined. And Indigenous leaders have been saying ever since, we are nations, we deserve a seat at the table, we are distinct societies, and we require self-government. So they haven't had that. That hasn't been part of the process yet, right? That's part of that ongoing systemic violence and oppression that we talk about. So at the United Nations, and Canada has ratified the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, it is embedded in there that these are nations of people, that they have the right to self-government. So now we have two things. We have our past legal history, the Royal Proclamation and the Silver Chain Covenant Wampum Belt, and we have our forward-thinking United Nations ratification of UNDRIP, but our Constitution is still in the way. Both the 1867 Constitution and our current, really gray zone Section 35 of the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. That needs to be resolved.
It does. Which is a segue into talking about some of, in the context of the Green Party issue. So last week, speaking about Indigenous, representation and issues. So Lorraine Reckmans, who you mentioned, who was the Green Party's now former president and the first Indigenous woman to serve in that role. And maybe, to my knowledge, I'm not sure if there's ever been another Indigenous Party political president, resigned from the party saying, I have no confidence in the leadership contestants. And that comes on the back of a Green Party online event where the current interim leader, Amita Kutner, who is trans and non-binary, was misgendered in their pronouns on screen. And this comes on the back of Annamie Paul resigning, who was the former leader and the first Jewish and Black federal party leader ever in Canada's history. So, and you're running for the leadership of the Green Party. How does all of these current issues and these issues going back to Annamie Paul inform the leadership race moving forward? How does the Green Party of Canada deal with all of these things?
Well, that's a massive question and massive problems, and a lot of specific ways of getting at it, and a lot of kind of overarching ways of getting at it. But what I will say is that I don't understand why we keep hurting each other. We just keep hurting each other. And when a human gets injured or hurt or feels attacked, we immediately go into either fight, flight, or freeze, right? Any feminist knows that, because that is our lived reality as women, right? Is that when we get attacked, we go into fight, flight, or freeze. And as an advocate for sexual assault survivor rights, we need to start recognizing that freeze is chemically one of those things that happens in our brain, right? That, like, why didn't you run thing? Why didn't you fight back? Why did you freeze? I chemically froze. So I think that we see that not just in the Green Party, but in movements all around the world, on the left, like when we don't succeed at stopping climate change, when we don't succeed at reducing nuclear weapons, when we don't succeed at saving that fragile wetland or stopping that highway or stopping that pipeline, it's very depressing. And it appears that there's this phenomena where we turn inward, and we hurt each other and we blame each other. And to the outside world, it can appear petty, when it's not, right? Like, people are genuinely hurt. And a lot of the time it's unintentional, and sometimes it's intentional. So really, like, the federal council under Lorraine, just before she resigned, they did send out a huge list. I had asked them to send that list, and they did, informing members of all the work that they had done. And as leader, I'm definitely deeply committed to continuing that work. I think a lot of members didn't know that they were doing that work in the background, right? If you can't champion what you don't know.
What kind of work do you mean?
So there's a justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion group.
Okay.
There's action teams doing data collection. There's the Indigenous Peoples Advisory Circle. They had redone a lot, like the Green Party had kind of ill-defined flows of power relationships between different bodies, like our fund and our federal council and our leader's office. So those got better defined, and it's just waiting for fruition. But there was some real internal tension that I'm not going to comment on because I wasn't a part of it.
Yeah.
I've just been an outside member, and I don't actually really know what really was going on. I'm assuming as I get more into the inner circle, I will, and I hope I don't get dragged into it. And I really hope I don't hurt anybody intentionally, or I won't never hurt anybody intentionally. I hope I don't hurt anybody unintentionally. I'm bound to. I'm really happy to say I'm sorry when that happens. And just try to tread softly. And Lorraine talked a lot about loving each other, and I'm going to try to follow her lead on that as much as possible. Just lead, because it is hard to be green. It is not easy to be green.
Well, and I mean, it's you say that as as a member of the party, and even within the last month or so, Amita's own partner stepped back from being involved with the Green Party of Canada, and so there's over the last, dating back to when Annamie was elected, or as by Green Party members, and then ran in the last election. There was a law. Well, there was someone stepped away from the party, joined the Liberals, Jenica Atwin. Then the federal election happened. With all of this kind of turmoil already in motion, it's just gotten more amplified in different ways. Some people have called for the suspension of the leadership race that you are a contestant in. Elizabeth May, along with the one other current sitting Green Party of Canada MPs, have said if that happens, they'll sit as independents. If the race is paused,
So I consider that last thing to be an abuse of power. I don't think that it's appropriate for people in such positions of power to kind of threaten and to influence the party's executive wing. I believe deeply in separation of powers, right? So as a student of politics, that's a basic requirement of a functioning democracy. And if you don't have people staying in their own lane between executive, legislative, and judicial, the separation of powers, those three branches, if you have people trying to influence two or three, then you're on the road to dictatorship, and that's directly against the Green political philosophy. So this is not new to the Green Party of Canada. This has been a problem since inception. They talk about it in D. Grunin. I read that book when I was 17. So Greens talk about, power corrupts. And how do we create institutions that, and it started in Germany for a reason, right? Because they saw the worst of it and they experienced the worst of it. And intellectually, the Greens wanted to create a system that enforced grassroots, diffused power structures. And I've been waiting. I joined in 2005. I've been waiting for that promise to come true, and I'm not going to wait any longer. I'm going to make sure it comes true myself. So my campaign is focused on two branches of inward-facing transformation. I'm going to focus on the electoral district associations, making them really strong in between elections. So nightly meetings, us getting together, us chatting it out. What makes our EDA strong? What are the local environmental issues that my leader's office can champion? How can I help them? And we have a lot of expertise in our party around climate crisis readiness. So food security, local food security options. Greens are already the expert on that. And that's what future generations, they need us to create that infrastructure now. Small scale, local based energy resiliency solutions. The Greens are the expert on that. And it's my job as leader to champion, to get us together, to get us talking about those solutions and to present that to Canadians. We already have this. It can't just be one person anymore. It has to be seen as a collective. And then when it comes to our member-made policy, I have been, since I joined in 2005, I've been a champion of our member-made policy process and staying true to our Constitution. So you can go back to 2010. So our Constitution said that we had timed election races, which is really true to the key principle of participatory democracy, that members need to be involved, citizens need to be involved in the decisions that affect them. And Elizabeth May and others were proposing a change to the Constitution to make, some of us called it leader for life, and to get rid of time leadership races. And so I've gone against Elizabeth before. In 2010, I was the last person at the mic at that general meeting begging members not to do it. When you stomp on participatory democracy, when you stomp on grassroots, there are real consequences. And 13 years later, we had lost that institutional knowledge on how to run a leadership race. We'd lost that institutional knowledge on how to onboard a new leader. And we had lost that institutional knowledge on what is the green vision beyond just one person, beyond celebrity-based politics. What is our collective base? How do we actually do participatory democracy? And our last virtual general meetings were a triumph. It was a year and a half late because of COVID. I was in the background really advocating for it to happen, like as a member of the Constitutional Working Group, saying, writing to federal council, a group of us saying, this is in our Constitution. We did actually have to have the electoral district associations make a petition to enacting some part of our Constitution, saying, okay, federal council, we know you guys are busy, but we need a general meeting. The members are in control of this party. We need a general meeting. And they were a triumph. We had them online. They were so innovative technologically. This massive army of volunteers. There were fun events. We had Global Greens come in as speakers. And so that to me is the best thing that happened to the Green Party in the past 2 years. The media doesn't want to talk about that. It was such a triumph. And I brought forward the motion to make our general meetings not every 2 years, but every year. That was my motion. And that's one of the reasons I'm running for leader, that members voted for it by 80% or more. I think just over 80%. And I feel responsible for that. I feel responsible for making us finally evolve to a living policy process and to being true to grassroots decentralized power structures.
Well, and I think that with any political party and with any movement, when participatory being participatory, what does that mean? How are, individual roles defined? I'm not sure if you've actually seen it. Maybe you should go. It's a good watch. There's a show on Netflix called Borgen. I'm not sure if you've heard of it.
Yeah, I haven't watched it yet, but you're not the first person who's told me to watch it.
But there's in the second season, so she's gone through this like big political transformation. She was Denmark's first female prime minister, and she goes through this. She ends up leaving politics, but then at some point she's in the private sector, and she's like, I'm going to go back in, and I'm going to create. I'm not going back to my old party. They actually didn't want her, and she goes and creates a new political party. And she rents this old space, and people, because they know her and because it's a new political party, so there's all of these people who just start showing up saying, I want this to be a party of animal rights. I want this to be a party actually of anti-choice. I want this to be a party of, of like Marxism, or, there's all of these people in this episode saying, this is what I want this party to be. And she reaches a breaking point where she's like, no, this is what our party, these are the, the foundational principles of what this party is about. And, animals are important, but nuclear power, whatever, or we're not going to be a communist party, we're not a party, we are a pro-choice party. And she said, basically, everyone, you need to leave. and then the party starts, and it really shows actually to some degree like the growing pains of this. But again, the participatory part, right? People are interested, they want to engage. And
so we have that formula right? The Green Party attracts a lot of special interest groups. Right. We do. And any member is able to bring forward a policy proposal. And then the membership votes on it. And we have a formula for what happens to those policies, depending on how many members vote on them. And then we've gotten away from the piece, the all-important piece, the direct democracy piece, where we talk it out. And then there was never the piece that's always been missing for at least as long as Elizabeth May was leader, was that connection between the member-made policy and what the leader says in front of the media. So Elizabeth, I know she read the member-made policy book, but we never saw her giving us direct credit for the policies that we made. And so in my platform, you can see a bit of it on my website right now, but it will be much more detailed in a few days. For every single policy, I detail like GO8PO 72, 2008, Policy 72, make local organic agriculture the center of all we do, because future generations require that infrastructure. We are in the era of climate crisis now. And 50 years from now, they're not going to be able to rely on large scale industrial agriculture. They need us to create infrastructures that they can rely on now.
I completely agree with you. And as I would say, like within my old political colleagues will know that I am a champion of agriculture and, small scale farmers, and industrial agriculture is, we're in for a world of hurt. And I also want there to be a very strong Green Party of Canada. I want the Green Party, and I don't say that because, and I get a lot of pushback in different ways, and being like, like people want to put you in a box. Our democracy is better when we have strong political parties, and that includes, in my mind, a strong Green Party of Canada. That being said, well,
thank you. I'm trying. We're trying. And that base is there. That foundation is there, right? So one of the things that I want to bring with my leadership is having at least 3 nights a week policy table talks. And one of them will be around farmers, green farmers. We have a huge bank of knowledge within the Green family, and farmers creating a national food security mandate. It is astounding that the other parties have not yet created a national food security plan for this nation. They need to.
I completely agree. But that being said, when it comes time for the next general election, if the Green Party platform, whatever, who under whatever leader it is, if it's under, if Canadians can't identify to more and, they're like, oh yeah, I love, I understand the value of this. But, like, talk to me about the economy. Like,
oh no, we have
talk to me about taxes.
That's a huge part of my platform.
Right.
So Greens have been talking about how to move us beyond capitalism. Greens have been talking about that since even before the Green Party started. Environmentalists know that capitalism is killing us, but capitalism is the system that underlines everything we do. It's what makes us feel safe. So as soon as you start talking about ways to move beyond capitalism, people feel threatened. So Greens do have really great solutions, macroeconomic solutions and microeconomic tools to slowly but surely, and now we just need to do it quicker, but safely evolve us out of a pure, dog eat dog, Mother Nature has no value unless it gets ripped up, changed, produced into something, used up, and then trashed into landfill, right? That is not, we just have to put guardrails on that. We have to evolve beyond a pure, left, right capitalist structure.
How does the Green Party of Canada become something like, the success that we see of the Green Party in Germany? Like, how does the Green Party of Canada become, a top political party that people elevate, to be within, to be, in a minority position, or in a coalition government, to be that partner? How do you get, because Canadians have to vote for the Green Party of Canada.
Me as leader.
Okay. But what the platform has to be compelling. It has to speak to Canadians. They have to feel connected to it, that they're being, and we're seeing there are political parties, the Conservatives and the Liberals and the NDP, all want to push us into, you're on my team or you're not. Right. And to some degree, in a different way, I would hope the Green Party needs to do that too. They need to speak to a broader group of the Canadian population to be able to get more MPs in the House and to, and to govern. That's the goal, right? Is to govern.
So yes and no, actually. Yes and no. And that tension is embedded again in every Green Party. It's even embedded in our basis of unity in our Constitution. So that tension between being a grassroots organization that does real work in our communities, and that's what I want to grow right now. That's what we need to do in order to succeed. If our electoral district associations are strong and are in front of communities and are providing real climate crisis solutions, social justice solutions in our communities across the country, then we have that visibility. And that's a game that the other parties have been winning, that we've been losing. They know that. They know that you have to have strong electoral district associations. They know that you have to go to every parade. They know that you have to, sign those, congratulations on your 50th anniversary letters. Yeah. And Greens, because we have been so kind of focused on just one person being the definition of the party, I've been in this party since 2005, and I've seen so many volunteers leave because our electoral district associations just dwindle away in between elections. So we need strong electoral district associations in between elections, and we need cohesive political messaging. And my political messaging is based in our member-made policy, but I don't just go for the mixed bag approach. I put ecological wisdom first because that is our first key principle. And so ecological wisdom, mostly around the climate crisis. I'm listening to young people. It's their planet and they are in a survival situation. So it behooves us now to create infrastructures that make their communities resilient to climate catastrophe events.
I completely agree. The difference, I think, is being at a table where you talk about the issue versus being at a table where the decisions are made.
Well, we'll get there.
Does the Green Party of Canada want to win elections?
Oh, absolutely. And
okay, that's good to hear.
I'm saying we've been missing out. This is how you win elections. You win elections by being active in your communities in between elections.
Because I feel like that's a message that is not getting translated. Like, I don't hear that from really anyone, in the Green Party. I don't hear anyone, I don't remember anyone just saying explicitly, I want the Green Party of Canada to win elections. I want the Green Party of Canada to elect members of parliament. I want to hear more about the winning, because that is also what will compel people to vote for the party, because they're not saying, I'm not going to, park my vote with someone because, this is like a sympathy vote, or, I really like what they're doing, or, whatever logic is used. And I'm guilty. I do this all the time, depending on the election. But like the winning, the talk about the winning is missing.
Yeah. And so in a first past the post system that is so antiquated and undemocratic, I mean, first past the post only works in a two-party system. However, we're in it and it's not going to change. You can advocate for proportional representation all day long in this country. It still hasn't happened, even after Justin Trudeau lied to us.
Yes. Well, it still hasn't happened. There's liberals that are still very unhappy about that.
So it's because it serves them, right? Doug Ford's has 100% of the power with 17% of the popular vote. We have a crisis of democracy in this country. Citizens still have to vote strategically against the worst case option. Citizens are not able to vote with their hearts.
Well,
so what the Green Party has to do, what the Green Party has to do, well, yeah, first of all, you're right. They have to vote. But what the Green Party has to do is fire Canadians up and make them believe in us so much that they're willing to take that chance that vote might not translate into a seat. But if we can reach the hearts and minds of Canadians to such a degree that they're willing to take that chance on us, we've been here since before 1988. We are ready. We are forming governments all around the world. And if we can be true on the inside of our structures to participatory democracy, to social justice, to ecological wisdom, if we can be true to that grassroots decentralized structure and prove to Canadians that our ground game is already making the survivability solutions for our children and our grandchildren and our great-grandchildren, if we can prove that we've got that ground game, but also prove that we've got that professionalism on the national stage, then you could see a green wave, you could see a green cascade. And that's what I'm hoping for.
I believe that it is entirely possible, but I think the first step is getting the internal stuff, sorted away, right? So that it's not playing out on a national stage. In order to move beyond that, to have, and then you have those messages. And I do want to hear Green Party politicians talk about winning, because winning, I don't think it's not a dirty word. You have to win to be at the decision-making tables, so that, as an opponent of nuclear power, right? So you're at the table and you have that vote. Or if it's talking about funding for small scale agriculture and local agricultural plans, you're at the table making that decision. Yeah. And Greens need to stop going for a celebrity-based hierarchical structure. And that's what Elizabeth May did represent. So we need to ensure that we elect leadership, not just me, but other leaders, like in our EDAs, our candidates, the whole gang of us needs to be true to that promise of a decentralized power structure, being true to our member-made policy process, and evolving in a way that because the climate crisis requires those new power structures, right? The climate crisis requires that we have resiliency embedded at the community level, at the regional level. And if we continue to play this game where we're afraid and we just give it up to a strongman and pretend that he's going to represent our interests, when they're not, they're kleptocrats. They are kleptocrats. Our current leadership are kleptocrats. So we need to stop. We need to become Canadians again. We need to be truly strong in our sense of national pride, in that we are all leaders.
This is a crisis moment. We all need to lead. Every dollar you spend or every dollar you don't spend is a ballot. And it's deciding how deeply you hurt this planet today or how softly you walk on this planet today.
I agree. I agree that the decisions that we're making right now, in some ways, actually, I think we're already too far gone in terms of climate change because of at the rate of warming, and we're seeing right now in Pakistan, for example, with the massive floods, we're seeing extreme heat in the Middle East, in around the world, in the States. Even our summer here in Alberta has been different. Forest fires, I want my children to be able to have. I didn't grow up, with the exception, I think, of one summer. I don't remember, my childhood is not filled about having to stay inside because of air quality warnings. I don't want that for my children, and I don't want that for their children. And the economy and climate have to be a conversation that brings both together. And so
and Greens are so good at that. We've been preparing for this moment for decades. We have real, gentle, but firm economic evolution solutions that do create a future that is not just livable, but that is full of joy.
Well, and I agree. And maybe this is, a good place to end it, because rarely do conversations end with, on the topic of joy. So I think that's lovely. I really, I'll keep watching the race and following your campaign as well as everything everything that's going on. Canada needs strong political parties like the Green Party of Canada, and that have, values that will, benefit future generations in really positive ways, not in dog whistle nationalistic politics. So I really, I'm rooting for the Green Party of Canada, and we'll see what happens.
Thank you so much, Sarah. This has been the best interview of the race so far. I really appreciate
well, that's very nice of you to say.
Yeah.
So yeah, we'll stay in touch, and I'll keep up the work on the campaign trail.
Yeah. I'll get in touch with you if I can make it out west.
Yeah, that would be great. Okay, thank you, Sarah.
Bye.
Bye.